The Fountain of Rebirth. Chapter 1, The Reincarnation of Fate. 1976 was a time of turmoil and change, and every progress in society was accompanied by sacrifice and suffering. And all this, for the two sisters, Yejinyu and Yejinking, is quietly changing. Yejinyu stood in front of the window, the cool breeze caressing her cheeks, bringing a hint of familiarity. She looked into the distance, and a sudden uneasiness welled up in her heart. Her sister Yejinking was making a big noise, and the sound came to her ears. She looked back and saw the familiar figure, with long hair and a shawl, and a face full of anxiety and indignation. Jinyu, I won't go to the countryside this time, you go. Otherwise, we'll be done for the rest of our lives. Yejinking gritted her teeth and said, her eyes full of unwillingness. Yejinyu shook her head gently, her body still looked a little weak, and she got up sickly, her face was pale, but her tone was resolute, I'll go. Don't worry, I'll go to the countryside. She has always been an obedient child since she was a child, whether it is to protect her sister or for the sake of her family, she has never rebelled against fate. However, this time, she felt that maybe this was the chance fate gave her to be reborn and be able to choose her life again. Yejinking pursed her lips indignantly, although she knew her sister's fragility and helplessness in her heart, she still couldn't calm the anxiety in her heart. If you do this, you will never be able to live the life you want. I almost ruined my life for you, and this time You have to be careful this time. Yejinyu felt her sister's invisible responsibility and love, but she couldn't tell her sister that all these turning points may have been doomed. She whispered again, Sister, the old He family in the east of the city. Don't associate with them anymore, they seem powerful on the outside, but they are malicious on the inside. A trace of complicated emotion flashed in her sister's eyes, and she did not respond, nodding silently. She knew that her sister had always been sensitive, and her warnings were not unfounded. Yejinyu turned around and walked out of the house with determination and embarked on a journey of destiny. Chapter 2, The Covenant of Xiaoquan Village. Yejinyu's rural location is Xiaoquan Village, a small village hidden in the mountains, far away from the hustle and bustle of the city. Life here is simple and hard, but for Yejinyu, it is a place where she can re-examine herself and replan her future. As soon as she stepped into the entrance of the village, she was stunned by the sight in front of her. There is a family living in the cowshed in Yongchuan village, and the male protagonist of this family, Gu Lingyu, is the biggest obstacle to Yejinyu's trip. Gu Lingyu is a young and introverted man, although his background is simple, he is also tenacious and resolute. He had some kindness with Yejinyu's family back then, and this time Yejinyu came to Xiaoquan village to repay this kindness. She used her meager rations to cook the few pieces of rice into rice balls, wrapped them in lotus leaves, and quietly put them into Gu Lingyu's straw hat. She secretly swore that no matter what the future holds, she would not let their family fall into trouble again. Gu Lingyu didn't notice all this, he was introverted and always silently endured the difficulties of life. Yejinyu secretly guarded him, took care of his grandfather in the cowshed, and loved his introverted young sister, just hoping to exchange for a peaceful future. Chapter 3, The Gu family returns to the city. After a period of time, Gu Lingyu's family finally ushered in the news of rehabilitation, and their family's grievances were finally clarified and they returned to the city. Gu Lingyu has also regained more options, and his life is no longer limited to the cowshed in Xiaoquan village, but has more opportunities for development. However, Yejinyu knew that all these changes did not mean that the fate between her and Gu Lingyu would become simple. She silently buried the feelings in her heart and did not reveal anything. She knew that there was always an invisible gap between herself and Gu Lingyu, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't seem to cross it. Chapter 4, 1981, The Cycle of Rebirth. When Yejinyu opened her eyes again, she found that she had come to 1981, a new starting point after being reborn. This time, she had already learned to play a more subtle role in the arena of fate. In this life, she clearly knew that her sister Yejinking and Gu Lingyu in the previous life had been a fake couple for several years, and finally lived as a resentful couple. A trace of sadness welled up in her heart, and these past emotions may have been irreparable. Yejinyu took a deep breath and promised herself that this time, she would not repeat the mistakes of the past, she would not live for others again, but to live her own wonderful life. So, she decided to start recontacting Gu Lingyu, but this time, she changed the sentence she said back then, I want to be your daughter-in-law. She took it back in time and said softly, I want to be your sister. After Gu Lingyu heard this, she was slightly stunned, and a trace of indescribable emotion flashed in her eyes. He doesn't know why, his attitude towards Yejinyu is always elusive. This time, he no longer accepted her emotions so easily, but felt that she was full of mysteries. Chapter 5, A Blind Date Encounter. With the Gu family returning to the city, Yejinyu also began to have her own social circle. Someone began to introduce her to blind dates, and in one of the blind dates, Yejinyu happened to meet Gu Lingyu again. The atmosphere of the blind date scene was delicate, and when Yejinyu was talking to a man, Gu Lingyu suddenly appeared. When the man saw Gu Lingyu appear, he hurriedly got up and greeted respectfully. Gu Lingyu smiled slightly, and said in a cold tone, "This is my brother." The man nodded in response, "I see, Mr. Gu." However, Gu Lingyu's cold smile made the scene fall into embarrassment. He added coldly, "The man who replied to this sentence last time has already broken his leg by me, and I love to run to the blind date market as soon as I quarrel," and I laughed. At this moment, Ye Jinyu's heart was a little surprised and a little melancholy. She knew that Gu Lingyu's attitude was not unintentional, but a deliberate provocation. His feelings for her are still complex and elusive. However, this also made Ye Jinyu understand that her rebirth may make her fall into the whirlpool of the past again, but this time, she will not let herself be led by fate again. She wants to live for herself and choose a future for herself, no matter how difficult the road may be. Chapter 6, The Unraveling of the Knot. After that embarrassing blind date, Ye Jinyu returned home, and couldn't help but feel a trace of complicated emotions in her heart. She knew that Gu Lingyu's words were not unintentional, but deliberately provoked her emotions. Her heart seemed to be bound by an invisible rope. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't let go easily. However, all this made her more determined and strengthened. This time, she is no longer the eldest princess at the mercy of others, nor is she a woman bound by the past. She wants to be the master of her own life, no matter how difficult the road ahead is. Gu Lingyu's existence, in her life, has long been indelible. He was the first obstacle after her rebirth, and the first hurdle for her to break free. And all this, no matter what, she had to face and untie it from her heart. One day, Ye Jinyu finally decided to go to Gu's house and find a chance to talk to Gu Lingyu. She knew that this conversation was not just about their past grievances, but also about their future choices. When she stood in front of the Gu family, a strange feeling surged in her heart. This mansion was once a strange place after her rebirth, and today, she finally stepped into this land that made her heart ripple. Gu Lingyu was sitting in the study, his eyes looking out through the window, as if he was thinking about something. When he heard Ye Jinyu's footsteps, he turned his head slightly, with a trace of deep emotion in his eyes. "Come in," he said flatly. Ye Jinyu walked into the study and didn't sit down, just stood in front of the window, looking at the scene outside. She thought about it for a long time in her heart, and finally spoke, "Gu Lingyu, all this is not only the rebirth of the past, but also the untied knot between us." A hint of surprise flashed in Gu Lingyu's eyes. He didn't speak, just listened quietly. Ye Jinyu turned around and looked directly at him. "In this life, I don't want to live in the shadows of the past anymore. I want to live freely and with choice. I know that I used to live for certain commitments, but now, I live for myself. Gu Lingyu, no matter how many mistakes we made in the past, I hope to be able to start again, as friends, or even as brothers and sisters." Gu Lingyu narrowed his eyes slightly, his expression was complicated and incomprehensible, as if he was trying to figure out the meaning of her words. He was silent for a moment and whispered, "You know what? Sometimes, I feel that the only person I can trust in this world is my family, and you were the person I wanted to protect the most." Ye Jinyu's heart was shocked. She never thought that Gu Lingyu would say such a thing, which made her speechless for a while, and her heart was mixed. "There are always too many unresolved entanglements between us." Gu Lingyu whispered, "Perhaps, we who are reborn should let these past events go away with the wind." Ye Jinyu nodded, and her heart seemed to be a little lighter. She knew that Gu Lingyu's heart knot was not easy to untie, but she also knew that this was the only chance she could fight for herself after she was reborn. Chapter 7, The Choice of Fate. As time passed, Ye Jinyu gradually integrated into the life of the Gu family, and her relationship with Gu Lingyu became more distant, but also more calm. There is no longer the subtle pull between the two of them in the past, but it has become a relationship of mutual respect. However, the cycle of fate has not stopped. At this time, Ye Jinyu's blind date, Lin Xiaochuan, began to get closer and closer to her. Lin Xiaochuan is a businessman from other places, who already has a lot of family business at a young age, has a handsome appearance, talks decently, and is also very attentive to Ye Jinyu. Every time he goes on a blind date, he always deliberately behaves very considerately, making almost everyone think that he is an ideal partner. But Ye Jinyu still remembered Gu Lingyu in her heart. No matter how she tried to make herself forget this past, that unfinished relationship could never be erased from her heart. Once, Ye Jinyu and Lin Xiaochuan met again, and at a banquet, he made a formal marriage proposal to her. "Jinyu, I've always felt that you were the woman I was looking for. I want to be able to spend my life with you, and no matter what happens, I will always watch over you." Ye Jinyu's heart fluctuated, but her eyes remained calm. She bowed her head, was silent for a moment, and then whispered, "Xiaochuan, thank you. But in this life, I want to be able to live for myself first, not for anyone to change myself." Lin Xiaochuan was slightly stunned, and then he smiled reluctantly and watched her leave. Ye Jinyu's mood did not relax because of this. She knew that her choices would affect every step of the way, and her fate was no longer in anyone's hands. Chapter 8, The Light of New Life. A few months later, Yejinyu finally fully adapted to this new life. She began to devote herself to her own business, and led Gu Lingyu's family to new prosperity together. Although Gu Lingyu has not completely disappeared from her life, the relationship between the two has become clearer, that is, each other's friends and relatives. One day, Yejinyu was reading in the study when she suddenly received a phone call. The caller ID is Gu Lingyu. "Jinyu, it's time for us to talk." Gu Lingyu's voice sounded a little helpless. Yejinyu smiled slightly, feeling that she could finally face her past feelings with the most peaceful mind. She whispered back, "Okay, let's talk." The twist of fate may not be a huge thunderstorm, but a calm breeze. Yejinyu finally understood that the true meaning of life does not lie in the pursuit of a specific emotion, but in how to master your own choices and live your true self at every moment. Epilogue. In this journey of rebirth, the story of Yejinyu and Gu Lingyu did not usher in a perfect ending, but it was a spiritual rebirth. Whether it is the entanglement of the past or the choice of the future, in the end, she chose to live for herself and pursue her own light for herself. And this journey will be her real destiny journey.